Hi everyone, Future Ben here, and today's episode is all about a process I went through a few months back where I queried my manuscript. Since then, several other Authortubers have uploaded similar content, including NCALIB. If you haven't already watched his video, do yourself a favor and check it out. His video focused on the tools I'm about to reference, whereas mine focused on dealing with rejection and what I plan to do after going through the querying process. Great minds think alike, and I hope you enjoy both of our well-developed videos. Hello! I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors.
Hey everyone, Future Ben here, and I am sorry to interrupt my video for the second time, but I got this box in the mail. I think I know what's inside. This is likely the proof versions of my manuscripts. That means that next week at the regularly scheduled time, 7 p.m., I'm going to do another live episode where I do an unboxing and we get to find out what's in the box. Either it'll be my manuscript and I will gush over how incredibly awesome it is or critique the printing job or whatever, or this will be a really awkward thing and this is some other bundle that I ordered. Hopefully it won't be a disappointment, but either way it'll be fun. So hope to see you there.
Today will be a little different from my usual writing topics, as I'll be walking through the querying process I just finished. I'll go over the resources I used, the ways I tracked everything, and my honest thoughts. To get started, what is querying and why do we do it? Authors who want to be traditionally published need to submit their manuscripts through the querying process to a specific agent within a publishing house. If accepted, the agent will then act on the author's behalf to ultimately publish their novel. Essentially, querying is the gateway through which we can traditionally publish our novels. Spoiler alert, for my querying process, I've only received rejection and silence, so this is not a success story. If that's what you came here for, then I guess I'll see you next week. If instead you want to learn from my process, then keep watching, and I genuinely hope you have better success than I did. I want to start with a massive disclaimer. The fact that mine or your works weren't picked up by an agent or publisher in no way diminishes the quality of the work itself. From all of my research and plenty of anecdotal conversations with traditionally and self-published authors, timing and luck are often more important than anything within our stories. Honestly, it might come down to something as trivial as what the person reading our query packets ate that morning. My final numbers were that I sent off 7 of 9 queries that I had prepped and have received 4 rejections. The missing 2 agents were due to the fact that they stopped accepting queries in between the time when I found them and the time when I was ready to submit. For the remaining 3 submissions, a reasonable amount of time has passed and I'm not expecting good news to magically show up in my inbox, so I'm interpreting the lack of a response as rejection. That was how my querying process ended, so how did it begin? And how did I put my story's best foot forward? First of all, I did a lot of research. Google was my friend for finding agents and publishers. Also, I have no idea where I got one spreadsheet from, but it was a list of hundreds of publishers and whether or not they were categorized as vanity publishers. The spreadsheet is outdated now, but it gave me some great places to start looking into and others to avoid. Now, I mentioned the term vanity publishers. They take money from authors as a publishing fee. That money may be eventually used to publish a book to give to you, but that's really about it. Vanity publishers are not respected, and all you really have is that physical copy of the book that's not widespread. So that you're all aware, writers should not need to front money for the publishing process if they're dealing with a legitimate publishing house. If you're asked to do so, then you're likely dealing with a vanity publisher, and you should run. Contracts with a publisher typically involve a percentage of the book sales, and if you're incredibly lucky, some kind of commission. I haven't made that far in the process, so I don't know what's considered to be normal within those agreements. Again, if you're asked to provide money for a publishing service, I would recommend getting a second opinion or outright telling the publisher, no. Going back to how I found agents, I started in Google with search terms associated with my manuscript. They were fantasy novel publishing companies. Then I filtered on dates. I wanted only recent ones, so that limited the search from the end of 2021 to early 2022. There was an article on Kindlepreneur which fit in that window and I found quite helpful, so I'll include a link for it in the description below. This article came out last November, so I imagine its information is still accurate if you're watching this video around when I originally posted it. In the article, Kindlepreneur listed off 30 publishers to look into if you're a writer without an agent. I believe technically they only had 27 companies listed, as though they removed publishers after the article was written. Still, there is excellent advice in there and a helpful checklist for what to do when submitting to an agent. You should read that article if you're starting your querying process. After Google, one of several agent-specific search engines I used was querymanager.com, which also doubled by allowing us to submit to the agents we found. Once I found a match for an agent within Query Manager based on my manuscript, I then cross-referenced them within their publishing house's website. This allowed me to verify that the agent was associated with a given publishing house and that they were accepting queries. There were a few discrepancies between what was presented in Query Manager and within the publishing house's website, so it's very important to double check, otherwise you'll be disappointed. There were a few instances where agents I was really excited to submit to were no longer accepting manuscripts, so I had to cross them off my list. Now onto those query submissions. Typically, an agent will ask for a query letter, a synopsis, and the first 10 pages of your manuscript, or the first chapter, whichever is shorter. The query letter should be 3 paragraphs, the first being a high-level overview of the manuscript, the second should be a blurb to garner interest in it, and the third should close it out with an introduction about the writer. The first paragraph high-level details include genre, word count, and title. It's also optional if you have a personal relationship with the agent to include that here. This could be something like meeting them at a conference or knowing their work and the other novels they've represented. The second paragraph blurb is meant to showcase the best and most unique detail about our stories so that it stands out from the hundreds of others the agent receives. Then in the third paragraph, we want to make ourselves shine. Do we have our own platform or a creative hobby that makes us more than a person who put words on a page? Lastly, show appreciation and thank the person for reading the query letter. Next, the synopsis is a one-page summary of the manuscript. It gives the full details from theme to characters to conflict to climax and end resolution. Be sure to include the spoilers and any major plot twists so that the agent fully understands the story, or as best they can from the one-page summary. The first 10 pages of a manuscript are usually the hard upper limit for what to submit. My first chapter was only 8 pages, so I sent that instead of the full 10. Agents or their publishing houses will specify how much of the manuscript to submit to them, but will tend to ask for whichever is shorter, for instance 10 pages versus the first chapter. I've seen agents ask for as many as the first 3 chapters, but that varies from agent to agent or publishing house to publishing house. Once I narrowed down the list of agents, I created Word documents for each of them. This isolated my query letters and synopses as well as the manuscript samples so that I could tailor them for what the agent was looking for. If the agent requested young adult fantasy, I focused on the drama and coming of age aspects within my manuscript. For someone who wanted horror, I played up the monster hunting after my main characters. I never lied or misrepresented anything within my manuscript, but I did highlight its different assets based on the agent's preferences. I tracked everything in a spreadsheet, from the what, where, and whens of this entire process. The what included what to send to each specific agent as they had different requirements. Some required query letters, some had specific questions to answer, and some wanted various different amounts of the manuscript as a sample. The where was where did I send this to, whether it was through querymanager.com, through the publishing house's website, or as a direct email to the agent. And the when is when did I submit, and when should I expect a response back, usually 30 to 60 days after I submitted. Most of the agents had profiles within querymanager.com, so that was how I submitted to them. One of the 2 outliers only had a profile within their publishing house, so I submitted through that website. And another directly asked for emails, so I sent them the entire bundle through that. There was one questionable submission where the agent was accepting manuscripts through querymanager.com and through their publishing house's website, in that there was a slight discrepancy between the information they wanted in either. For that one, I submitted to the publishing house as I assumed it was the most up-to-date. Yes, I did check both websites to try and figure out which was the newest in terms of information, but I couldn't figure it out. I'm still worried that I may have submitted the request wrong due to the discrepancy, but I will honestly never know. Overall, my query submission process was both painless and incredibly nerve-wracking. What I mean is that the resources and tools are all there for us to use to make this somewhat seamless. I mean, finding an agent was not that difficult. It just took a lot of time and I needed to do a lot of research into what they were looking for. Preparing my various query letters, synopses, and answers to agent-specific questions was by far the most time-intensive and stress-inducing step. I tore apart query letter after query letter to get the phrasing just right, and after weeks spent on this, in hindsight, there are things I still wish I could change. Then I submitted and waited, which was oddly tranquil compared to creating those bundles. Realistically, I know it is a far stretch goal to be accepted by an agent, so while in limbo, I'm prepping my manuscript for self-publishing. Rather than continue to submit new batches of query letters or tailor my manuscript to what specific agents are looking for, I decided to only do this process once. That drastically lowers my chances of being traditionally published, as it takes most authors rounds and rounds of this querying process before their first manuscript gets picked up. I'll post plenty of content in my experiences with self-publishing, so those videos will be coming soon. If you want more information now about how to self-publish, I co-host a podcast with SD Houston and Morgan Lee called the Self-Publishing Tips and Tricks. There we interview various self-published authors about their resources, tools, and experiences. This was my experience to try and get traditionally published. For a more extensive point of view, Barrett Laurie has an entire series on his querying process. In addition, Michelle Schusterman, Alexa Dunn, and a variety of others all have videos which I use to prep my submissions. I'll include links for them in the description below so that you all can benefit. At this point, I can safely assume that my first manuscript will not be traditionally published. However, I am on track to self-publish it by the summer, and I am ecstatic to go on that journey with you. I cannot wait. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write. If you enjoyed my detailed experience on the querying process, then please press those like and subscribe buttons. Let me know in those comments whether you've queried manuscripts. Do you agree with my opinions, or is everything I said wrong? I post my running and writing progress on Instagram and Twitter as Running to Write, so be sure to follow me and join in with your own thoughts. I have great news for Running to Write. I am starting a monthly newsletter. Please sign up if you want regular updates on my assorted musings, pitfalls, and lessons learned. I'll also include relevant milestones in writing and running. See you next time. Until then, prep your manuscript to query even if you don't want to submit it. I found this entire process to be incredibly valuable in terms of thinking about how I would market my upcoming novel.